Welcome to Regis World Literature. This is lesson 26. The tape is on regarding grammar. We're still in the section on commas, and we're going to be talking about some new ideas now. Parenthetical information. It says parenthetical information is not considered critical to the meaning of the sentence as a whole. If we removed it completely, the sentence would still make as much sense as before. Parenthetical elements can function as introductory or closing elements, as we have seen, but they can also appear anywhere in a sentence. So we have talked about an introductory thing, like when I was traveling in Croatia, comma, I met a lot of interesting people, or in a way, comma, they are both right, especially that second example, in a way, comma, they are both right. I could have just chosen to make that sentence, they are both right. And so that is a phrase that is not needed for the meaning of the sentence. Okay. And as an afterthought, I could have said something like, I find such behavior appalling, comma, frankly. We've used these examples before last time in closing, introductory and closing comments. And that comment, frankly, is not needed for the meaning of the sentence. I could simply have said, I find such behavior appalling, period, without that ending phrase. Now, the point here is that you could also take a parenthetical information and place it in the middle of the sentence. So it could be at the introduction, in the middle, or at the end. If it's in the middle, you must surround it with commas. Let me see if I got an example here. Okay, so illustrating this, we could either have our parenthetical information at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end of a sentence. When I have it at the beginning, I follow it with didn't realize that was going to crazily do away with that. There we go. Followed by a comma, in the middle, surrounded by commas. Quite frankly, the phrase, surrounded by commas, and at the end, following a comma. Okay, so that's the big idea, is parenthetical information not needed for the essential meaning of the sentence, like an additional phrase, not critical to the meaning, will be separated from the basic sentence by a comma. Now, there are several types of parenthetical information. We could have absolute phrases, appositives, relative clauses, interjections, and nouns of address. So we'll be looking at some of those this time and some of those next time. But 5 basic types of parenthetical information. Okay, so having listed all 5 types, let's go back and learn about each one of them. We'll start with absolute phrases. An absolute phrase, sometimes known as an absolute construction, we'll use the first term, absolute phrase, is usually made up of a noun. Let's try that again. An absolute phrase is usually made up of a noun or pronoun and a participle, along with any modifying information. It is always considered a parenthetical element, so it is always set apart by 1 or 2 commas, 2 if it's in the middle of a sentence. We might sometimes use dashes instead of commas to highlight the absolute phrase more dramatically. So we usually use absolute phrases at the beginning of a sentence to introduce additional information, or at the end of a sentence to provide a final comment on the sentence as a whole. However, it is also possible to use an absolute phrase in the middle of a sentence to highlight or put extra emphasis on the extra information. For example, the test finished, comma, Jason heaved a sigh of relief. My absolute phrase is the test finished. What have I got? What makes up the absolute phrase? A noun or a pronoun with a form of a verb, okay, called the participle, and maybe any modifiers. The modifiers are optional. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for. Okay, so here in this sentence we have the test finished. This is the absolute phrase. It has a noun and a participle, because the main subject of the sentence is Jason, and the main verb, the action of the sentence, is heaved. So let's think of it again. The test finished, comma, Jason heaved a sigh of relief. And that's an example. Another example. She walked out the door, her head turning for a last look at home. Long absolute phrase. The main subject and action and verb is she walked. She walked out the door, comma, her head turning for a last look at home. For a last look at home is just more modifiers. This is the noun of the absolute phrase, and this is the participle. Is that starting to sound like something you could pick there? And that was this ... is part of the modifiers. Her head turning for a last look at home. Okay, so this is really at the beginning. This sentence is at the end. A third example, I hope, God willing, to get into Harvard next year. What would that be an example of? That would be an example of having the absolute phrase in the middle. Okay, I hope, okay, that's the subject and verb, to get into Harvard next year. That's the rest of my sentence. Okay, my main sentence. God willing, either set apart by dashes or by commas, is an absolute phrase. Okay, it is not part, it's a parenthetical element, just like we described parenthetical information before, and it has what? A noun and a participle. Okay? So those are three good examples of that. Now let's talk about the second idea, and that would be the appositives. An appositive is a proper noun or a noun phrase that serves to describe or rename another noun or pronoun. Appositives most commonly provide parenthetical or non-essential information about the noun they describe. These are known as non-restrictive appositives. So there's two types of appositives, non-restrictive and restrictive. And non-restrictive appositives are indicated by the comma surrounding them. Remember, if the appositive appears in the middle of the sentence, it's surrounded by two commas. If it appears at the beginning or end, it's followed or preceded by just one. For example, the heir, Prince William, is adored by many. The proper noun, Prince William, provides a name for the heir, so it provides additional information. So in this sentence here, as we've got it written down, Prince William is my non-restrictive appositive, and I am surrounding that by commas. Let's look at another example. Okay, a second example here. The office, an old colonial building, badly needs repairs. The appositive phrase, an old colonial building, describes the noun office. This is non-essential, or we call it what, non-restrictive appositive. And so we're really talking about the office. This is my subject. Needs repairs. This is my verb. And this is a appositive phrase, okay? And it's surrounded by commas. Let's look at another. My sentence, a true classic. This book inspired a generation of young readers. The subject of the sentence is book. The verb is inspired. A true classic is the appositive, and it's separated from the main sentence, or from, the main sentence is a good phrase for that, by a comma. Now, what do we mean when we're talking about restrictive appositives, the second type of appositive? So a restrictive appositive is essential to the meaning of a sentence. These are known as restrictive appositives. I'm sorry, I'm reading a sentence here. And they are not set apart by commas. No comma. Most commonly, these are proper nouns that rename a common noun, though appositive noun phrases can occasionally be restrictive too. For instance, the popular restaurant Joe's Place gets thousands of diners a day. Let me go ahead and write that down, and then we'll discuss it, why that is restrictive. Okay, I've given you two examples here. The first one says the popular restaurant Joe's Place gets thousands of diners a day. Now the subject is restaurant. The verb is gets. The restaurant gets. But it's a certain restaurant we're talking about. So Joe's Place, if I took away Joe's Place, I wouldn't have any clue the meaning the popular restaurant gets. Which popular restaurant? It's really needed. It's an essential part of the information. So that's the restrictive appositive, and notice what's lacking. No commas around it. Here's another example. Jeremy Jones, the professor, had gained more fame than Jeremy Jones, the novelist, ever did. Now, this is interesting because our subject is the professor. Has gained is my verb clause. Okay. More fame than Jeremy Jones, the novelist. We're comparing the professor to the novelist. So this is the hang on. Sorry about that. Okay, so the professor, but which professor? It matters. And so Jeremy Jones is my restrictive. It's essential. My restrictive appositive, no comma before it. And it is another restrictive appositive, this one referring to, of course, the professor, this one referring to the novelist. Okay. Again, what we're pointing out is that if your appositive is needed, okay, a proper noun or a noun phrase that serves to describe, if that is needed for the meaning, then do not put commas. Okay, so there's three more now. Three more types of parenthetical information we'll discuss next time, which would be relative clauses, interjections, and nouns of address. So make sure you know these two types, absolute phrases, how do you define it, appositives, the two types of appositives, and what that means regarding punctuation. Excellent. So we'll you guys have a blessed time on this restricted activity time. Be praying and sensitive to those around you, and stay up academically, because we do not want to lose these weeks. God bless you all.